Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to 2025. I am happy to be one of the first speakers that gets to talk to everyone here. And so thank you for taking the time out. We'll get right into it to provide value. Let me briefly tell you who I am so then you can see how I could provide some assistance on what you're needing. So my name is Michael Conte. I have worked with over 1,000 families over my 25-year career. I have spent time, I owned a company that provided ABA services, speech services, and occupational therapy service, very holistic for many young kids from 18 months to 12. And then I spent another part of my career working with severe behavior. So kids who couldn't stay at home anymore because a lot of severe aggression, self-injurious. And so I do have a lot of experience with behavior. And so with that, let's talk about the topic that we're talking about today. We will hold off and have time for FAQs. So I love questions. Please put those in the chat. When you put the question, put the age of your child, because sometimes the advice will be different from a 2-year-old to the 13-year-old to the 43-year-old. So with that, we're going to talk about tantrums and meltdowns. I'm going to focus more on the tantrum side, but I will explain the difference of both later on. But they have a lot of the how we are going to treat them in terms of the behavior intervention plan will be very similar with some exceptions. So with that, let's just talk about tantrums in general, because nothing is worse than when you're at a market or you're out in public and then all of a sudden your child or the person that you're taking care of just completely has lots of behaviors. And from me, who's observed lots of kids and worked with a lot of parents, tantrums can be very complicated to solve because the most important thing, not all tantrums look the same. And so tantrums is really an umbrella with a lot of different behaviors underneath. Because one kid's tantrums can just be falling on the ground and just crying and being loud. Another kid's tantrum could be biting and throwing everything. And I think with that, that's why it makes it when you look for online information, you get all this, conflicting. So with that, let's try to deconstruct and find a way that you can leave today with just a better plan and strategy on A, preventing the behavior, because that's the most important, B, surviving when you're in the middle of the behavior, and then C, having a way to kind of reflect and just build a better system. So what my company does at Parent Empowerment Coaching is just building systems so that parents can find a better way to help their kids. So when you think about these tantrums, I talked about there's lots of behaviors that can come. I think one of the important things as when you start to observe, so we're in the beginning, right? Preventing behavior, but understanding it. I think it's good that you can define what a tantrum means for you. Because in order to have an intervention, you need to kind of know what behaviors are you actually looking at, because you'll have to kind of do them in order, meaning you can't solve a tantrum behavior, but what you're solving is the crying or the hitting or the throwing. So one of the objectives is just kind of write down what is happening during that tantrum. And it's good to be specific. Is it crying with and without tears? Because that can make a difference on what the intervention looks like. Is it falling to the ground, or what type of aggression? Is it intense? Is it light? So that helps when you start to get to the end on what to solve. So we define behaviors. It's a good way for us to kind of know what we're trying to accomplish. So let's kind of talk about causes, because I think that's what parents, why is my kid on the ground? Why are these things happening? Now, we have to realize that sometimes we may not get the answer to everything. Sometimes we know, right? It is the candy bar or the candy to put right when you're getting ready to leave and check out. That's what caused the tantrum, which of course they put it there for a reason. Um, so some of the common causes of tantrums, I think, is always starting with biological first. So kids do lots of things. We'll talk about when it's not based in biology, but to be good at behavior intervention really is isolating different variables. What I see what happens to a lot of families is they get overwhelmed because they're trying to solve everything at once. And they're not exactly sure, A, what's the cause, and then B, what intervention they tried worked. And so I call it, it's just the mystery. They just pull something out. If it worked, they'll use it. But they're not understanding the reasoning. So biology first means look at the common biological issues that can sometimes cause a tantrum. And they can be just the simple things. Hunger, knowing when the last time your kid ate. It could just be fatigue. If you have a kid under 6 and it's in the afternoon and it's normally, when they tend to get drowsy, your probability behavior is going to shoot up rapidly. A lot of common things are just frustration. So if you have a kid who doesn't have a strong communication system, you can see how frustrating it could be. So imagine if you didn't have a strong communication set, or let's say you traveled to a whole new country and no one spoke your language, you can get frustrated of not getting your needs met. And I think that was what happens to a lot of kids. They just get really frustrated, and that frustration then leads to behaviors that we don't want to see, coming from a tantrum. In some cases, it is just change in routine. And we know that a lot of kids on the spectrum, and honestly, a lot of adults in general, do not like change. And so I think in changing routine, all of a sudden, it creates uncertainty. The kid starts to react, and now we have behavior. And so I think those are some biological ones. And then we kind of moved into kind of the behavioral ones that take place. But by starting biology first, you could be very proactive on how to prevent tantrums before they happen. And for me, in my 25 plus years of experience, when I talk to parents, we focus a lot of time on preventing behavior, because the better you get at preventing behavior, then you spend less time dealing with the consequences of that behavior. So I want you kind of in that mindset. Think of all the things biologically before you go out or in problem areas, and really be mindful. Have you accounted for those things? Really helps to isolate the variables. I forgot a very important one when it comes to autism and it comes to biological pillars, and that's just sensory overload. So we know that autism is a neurological disorder, and for a lot of kids, where a light that's above won't bother you at all, that light might as well be the sun to them, because their body is just highly sensitive to certain sights, certain sounds, certain smells. So you want to kind of be aware of your child's sensory systems. Now, you don't have to be an expert, but really start to think, what dominant senses do you see in your child often? Especially if they do any self-stimulatory type behaviors. Are they always doing things with their ears? Are they always fidgeting, doing things with their hands? Are they mouthing? Might give you some context when you go out, what things could be triggering events or even calming events when a child gets in a certain space. So as we start to talk about preventing tantrums, it's important to try to keep consistent but flexible routines. Life, we can have the exact same things take place. And I am of the big fan of a child needs to adapt to life to a certain degree, right? They can't eat chicken nuggets every single time. Well, at least they shouldn't, from a health standpoint. So really think about the consistency of the routine might be a way to kind of help. And things happen. You might need to go a different route. You might need to go to a different market or a grocery store. I think that's where, if you know you're changing the routine, it's for you to be mindful that that can be a setting event for behavior. And so just be proactive. Hey, I'm going to change a routine. I need to be more calm, or I need to give my kids something that they can enjoy so that they don't get overwhelmed. I think is a great part of being proactive, preventing the behaviors. Another thing to prevent tantrums is really trying to lean into, if your kid has the cognition, the power of choices. So we'll talk about what happens in the middle of the tantrum because, of course, once the behavior happens, everyone's blood pressure rises and it just becomes chaos. But if you can, before any tantrums or any event, know what choices that you can give to your child or the person you're taking care of, it really helps to keep you in a calm area where you can provide assistance. So even before, if you notice that your child is starting to have, good morning, um, if your child's starting to have just any type of related issues, you might want to have choice A, choice B, and in some cases you need a choice C, but really just having two choices can help a child choose. So as they start to feel overwhelmed, you can say, here are your two options. I think it's great knowing those before you go in. So that's another area as you build your system. It's just kind of write down two choices, maybe four at the most, that you have available depending on the environment. So that's a good way to kind of prevent the tantrums from happening. It's always preparing for transitions. I think transitions is where where all the drama takes place. So of course we have to define what transition is. It's essentially going from one environment and moving into another environment. And although it seems so kind of easy for most of us to navigate, imagine if you don't have a good communication system and you have all these interfering behavior, sensory, every change to a new environment builds uncertainty. And if you tell me what's the start of a tantrum? Uncertainty is one of the key ingredients that kind of kicks up the behaviors that you don't want to see. So be prepared for that. Know if your child is a great, average, or poor transitioner, and then you could be more proactive. So this is where maybe having their favorite toy that they can play with when they go from point A to point B, or is maybe you and your child singing a song. If your child really likes music, maybe singing while going to the next one makes that new environment less uncertain. I think really serves a purpose. And this is where the power of visuals can really help if your child responds to it. So whether it's just a picture of what's going to take place, whether now there's everything online, you can even create pictures with AI tools. And you don't need to have, a full video for everything, but just sometimes the visual of we're first going here and then we're going somewhere else kind of helps to hopefully ground the child to know what to expect. And so the more you can at least let a child or any person know what to expect, the more you reduce uncertainty, that helps to reduce tantrums. And so I like how we're just kind of isolating the variables that takes place. And then the last one is just encouraging communication. So communication, so in my previous chapter, I took a lot of kids out in the community, and all these interesting things took place. But I knew that a child was more prone for behavior once they stopped communicating with me. Now, all children have all different layers of communication. Some have strong, some have medium, and some have poor. But when I'm not able to get responses, even asking simple questions and being relaxed, I don't want to just ask questions repeatedly because that can create its own behavior or even potential tantrum. But once a child stops talking and I can just see them just kind of absorbing the environment, then they might be too focused on the uncertainty. So sometimes I'll ask, little silly questions if a child's in a good mood, or I might just ask the little small things. It's kind of a way to touch base. And so I wouldn't use this one frequently, but I want to give you just a couple things that you can kind of add to your system. And the best time to work on these is before the tantrum happens. So a lot of times I'm talking to parents and they don't have these things set up yet. And so of course they get into the tantrum and now we get into, I call it that mental scramble. Behaviors happen, everyone gets frustrated, and then all our common sense, all systems go out the window. So just have these things prepared. And we're talking half a sheet of paper. No thesis, You're not writing a book. It just helps you that you can feel confident. And antecedents is just a great route to go. So I want to spend a lot of time on that because I just think that we spend so much time on the consequences. In my 25 years, you win with antecedents, you survive with consequences. So I want to kind of make that part clear. So let's talk strategies, right? All right, antecedents didn't work this time. Kids on the floor screaming, some behaviors taking place. The first thing to do. So, they tell you when you go and they do CPR, it's like the first thing to do. The first thing I would like you to do is take 3 slow, deep breaths. And you're going to not want to do it. It's going to feel like the world is going so fast. But the reason why it allows your heart rate to slow down and your blood pressure to go down. And for someone who spent a lot of time with behavior, extreme behavior, if you tell me what creates that behavior escalation, it's biology. Kid is overwhelmed, heart rate's up, speed's going fast, behavior's flying, and then the parent's heart rate and blood pressure starts to match it. And now we have this competing aspect, and then everyone's spun up. And we've all been there. We're all human. And once we're in that space, we're having a tantrum. So that's what I find funny is a kid has a tantrum, and then all of a sudden, like the parents having a tantrum, and then the environment's having a tantrum. So I see the infection. 3 slow breaths. And what you're doing is just allowing yourself the time to think. You have those 3 slow breath seconds. You're not going to solve anything in that time. That's number one. When it happens, you need to find that way to send yourself just enough to use one of your strategies. Give the choice, ignore behavior, slowly redirect. And so for some kids, you might just acknowledge their feelings. Hey, I realize you're overwhelmed can sometimes help you sympathize with what's taking place. Depends on the kid and depends on what's taking place. But sometimes acknowledging their feelings can help. For some kids, depending on where they are sensory, sometimes even a gentle touch can help. You don't want to reward people with touch during a tantrum, but for some kids, they are truly don't have the ability to remain calm. So sometimes it could be a gentle touch can be helpful. What you want to do is really start to do redirection. And really, I like declarative sentences. Hey, let's go here. And so I'm not trying to, for a lot of parents, when there's behavior, we just start asking questions or we start demanding maybe a little too much. And so maybe it's, all right, hey, let's get up, or hey, let's do this activity. And notice how my words are trying to be in a way that's gentle but firm. Because I think sometimes we're getting that our blood pressure goes up. It's definitely not gentle, and sometimes a little bit too firm. So sometimes you want to redirect, and you want to minimize the over talking. So what you don't want is get up, stand up, know what you need to do. You know what you're going to take away. I'm going to take away your toy. I'm going to take away your toy. And so A, you're raising your blood pressure. And when a child's under that state, they're not be able to process the information. So instead of you just kind of words, be strategic with your words. Say a statement and let it breathe for a little bit. All right, stand up. Let it breathe 5 seconds to 20 seconds. And then maybe you can try, one of your other redirects, or you can try another activity, but don't get into my words are going to get me through this. Because really the words that I can get you through this, it's your demeanor. And a lot sometimes your gestures. So even for some kids, I try to use minimal words. Sometimes I'm using just signs. I'm just saying, stand up or come here. I try to keep it very simple because I want to center their energy with mine. And if I'm calm and I can give good eye contact, get near their level, it's amazing how sometimes that can help to center them a little bit and not feel as unstable. So those are some of the ways that you can really start to kind of help in that midst of the chaos. Now, sometimes it's going to be chaos. Sometimes you're not going to have a reason, and sometimes it's messy. And that's okay. They're human, and you're human, and everyone's around human. When you eventually they get up, um, when eventually there's an issue, then at that point you want to do a quick reflection. So that quick reflection can be what went well when this took place, what didn't go well, and what's just one thing I want to do to get better to me close the loop. Because a lot of times when you just get back into the car, or you just get back home, your brain's still spinning, you're upset, there's a lot of blame, and we're not actually solving how to get better. And so if you can just push the blame for a second and just focus on that piece, I think that's very important. And so someone asked, I need to go into the difference between a meltdown and a tantrum because they're like cousins. So for me, the definition of a meltdown first is when a child is physically overwhelmed, meaning the environment got to a space where they can no longer regulate themselves, right? So that could be the sensory, that could be the transitions, but they just don't have the capacity. But it wasn't necessarily something that they wanted. It was the environment that essentially created the behavior that takes place. So that's kind of a meltdown. A tantrum usually requires an act, meaning they normally wanted something that was the initial cause of the behavior. They wanted the candy bar. You told them no. Tantrum, right? So to me, that's what makes it distinguish because in a tantrum, the core tends to be they wanted something. So now you get to decide do they get it or not, which in most cases they shouldn't get it. And that's kind of starts the behavior versus a meltdown is there. I don't know what to do in this environment. I don't have the communication skills. And then that takes place. Now they can look exactly the same, meaning two kids could walk in, one's having a tantrum and one's having a meltdown, and the behaviors can look the same. But you might want to treat a meltdown with more biology, and really you should start both with biology. Tantrums, I tend to have a little bit more of a boundary. I'm probably not going to give them the candy bar. Whereas in a meltdown, I may buy it. I won't give it to them after they're calm, but I'll maybe save it for a little bit later. So that's kind of the distinction between the two. But I want to know that there's a difference. Can a meltdown lead to a tantrum? Yes. And essentially, tantrums turn into meltdowns from a behavior standpoint. But it's good to know the distinction so that you can see it and know, okay, that's a meltdown. He can't regulate versus the child wanted something that they couldn't get that started the behavior. So time goes by so fast. So we talked about the tantrums to know the difference. And then, at times, kids are going to have behaviors, but when the behaviors are interfering or just very severe, right? I think when you get to that severe behavior, that's where you may need some outside assistance, outside professionals that can provide a little bit of assistance, maybe having a behavior intervention plan. What's cool now with ChatGPT, although not perfect, is you can create a behavior intervention plan and have some ways to take a look at it. Something that my company helps with, we help parents with setting up systems of all types. And so actually later this month, we'll be writing some things that are no cost because unfortunately in these 25 years, we have made little progress on how parents can help their children. Doesn't matter if you're in the United States, doesn't matter where you are across the world. We're still struggling with these systems failing us. Education systems, healthcare systems, government systems. And so, kind of my final takeaway is as a family, you can build a great system where your child can learn. And I want you to leave this talk feeling empowered. You can create that system without the help of anyone. And there are people that can provide some assistance. And so our company is one, there's many other professionals, but don't feel you have to just do this all on your own. There's lots of resources out there that can really help with the process. And with that, self-care for the parent is important. We are all humans. We need the energy. That energy comes from how you sleep, how you take breaks, how you connect with other parents. If I had to kind of be a genie and grant a wish, I want parents to realize their energy is the energy that will allow them to build a system to help their child. But the parent has to have the energy. Now, again, we're all human. No perfection, but the more you realize that you can grow within yourself and help your child at the same time, I think the more that you'll see your child make the progress in a positive light. So, with that, I want to open up. I would love to hear questions. I would love for any clarity on anything that I talked about. 30 minutes goes by fast. I covered the antecedents, a little bit of the behavior, and I just briefly covered consequences. But any questions or comments, I am more than happy to answer at this time. And while we're waiting for questions, one thing I want to talk about with the consequence side, it's amazing how just writing just one or two notes, so you can almost have like a tantrum or meltdown journal. Because what happens is when your heart rate and everything's going up, you start to not get a correct perception on what really took place. And so as soon as you're able just to calm down just enough, it could just be a simple sentence of, I need to make sure he eats before we go. Or, this environment was too loud. I need to bring my headphones. I just think that little small little bit just kind of helps you to know that you're getting better at it. I think a lot of parents, they get that one bad incident and they're just never going out. They're not going to the store. They're never going to Barnes and Noble again. That they're done with it. But essentially, just knowing that you can take another step allows you to evolve and be curious. And so I just want to add that reflection, just one or two sentences. There is no thesis. It's just a good stream of thought. And then now you can kind of build kind of your game plan and put one piece at a time. Any other questions or comments? While we wait for one, since it's the beginning of the year and we're talking about 2025, I know it's a goal season. It is as a family, parent, provider, when you think about interventions for your kids, really try to zone in on focusing on 2 to 3 goals at the maximum, especially if you're in the beginning or you're having challenging behavior. I see what a lot of families do is they're just doing trying to do too much. And then I get it. You want your kid to make progress, you're concerned, you don't know what the next steps are, but you're working on fitness goals, you're working on yes, Maria, Barnes and Noble. You're working on fitness goals, you're working on potty training, and you're working on behavior improvement, and you're getting speech therapy, and you're doing this activities. And it just really gets hard for the family to focus. And so it's a great time of year on really simplifying the goals. One behavior goal to focus on. They may have multiple behaviors. Just pick one to focus on. And I usually say pick the easier one to start if you're new to setting up goals, because then that helps you to focus to know how successful you are at modifying your child's behavior. One behavior goal, one communication goal. I always think we're always trying to work on communication improvement. So just one area. Signs, pictures, going from one word to 2 words is very helpful. And then one of any other goal. And just start there. I think if you can start with just 2 to 3 goals, you'll get more confident what's taking place. Now, if you mastered that for 2 months in a row, you can add three more goals and get to six. But I think that cadence is something that's sustainable and helps us succeed. And so, thank Autism Connect for allowing me to do this talk early in the year. I am available on Facebook. I'm available on LinkedIn. You can send me any questions, and I will send some information to Autism Connect on our free 30-day transformation, where we can help you set some plans for 2025 and really understand how you can be empowered on this journey. That's more about. So I got a question about neurodivergent support. So, and I guess maybe some clarity, um, you know, um, on that question. But essentially, we spend a lot of time working with the families so that they can help their kiddos. We don't work with young adults or anyone directly. And I think that's by design. We really want to focus on the younger the child, the better. But even if a child's older, really setting up a better system of how to navigate the day and how to take place. And then I do a lot of things on behavior improvement. So definitely any behavior questions, I've seen almost every behavior, not every, but I've seen almost every behavior in these 25 years. I think helping set up with a simple behavior intervention plan, I think can go a long, long way. So if you have questions about that, we can even set up a potential just free consultation, a short call, and then give you some tools so that you can be proactive. So with that, I think I want to turn it back over to either Autism Connect, or I think at some point it may end the streaming service. And so if you can give me some guidance on the rest of it. Okay, so that I can end it. All right. But thank you. Thank you all. I want you guys to stay empowered. I want you to stay informed. 2025 is the year that you are going to help you and your child be as optimized and as best as possible. Enjoy, enjoy. Have yourself a great one.